This is not for the faint of heart.
Right, exactly.
None of it.
This is not going to be a simple step-by-step, and for a lot of people, it will not work. And to be honest, there are still some days where mine do not work, Yeah. And I'm like, without sounding big on myself, like I'm good at this. I know how to market on Facebook. I know how to pivot. I know how to market non-music things.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to Creative Juice. I am one of your hosts, Corrin Campbell. With me is Jack.
Hello.
Hello. And we are not going to do a floofy intro today because we have some shit to dig into.
Getting right to it today. You guys
right
are in
to
for
it.
a treat.
I've been setting this up for weeks now, and everyone was like, okay, and then. So today we're going to be digging into my very questionable funnel. Jack is going to put me in the hot seat on this campaign that I've been running, which is not totally in compliance with the buddy system, but it is later on down the road. And so he's going to make me defend why I'm still running this funnel, right?
Yeah, this is going to be a really cool unpacking of an experimental funnel, an experimental ad campaign. I think you guys are really going to dig what we get into here. Corrin and I have had multiple discussions about this and even doing this episode. So I'm excited to kick it off.
Yeah, because we've been seeing this happen. I mean, obviously, if you're in the indies group or if you are an indie musician reading a blog ever, you've seen a lot of buzz going on about free plus shipping and handling, which, we have a training about free plus shipping and handling, which actually post this experiment may get revamped a little. And, this isn't a new concept, right? Marketing has been doing free plus shipping and handling funnels for a long time, right? Even back when you could buy 12 CDs from Columbia House, it was free plus shipping and handling. And then they charged you $80 per CD after that. But this is not a new concept by any stretch. And we've been seeing more and more indies talking about it. It kind of cycles back into discussion once every few years. And so it's become a hot topic of 2020 once again, probably because we're all stuck inside and trying to find other ways, other means to get our albums and music out there. So yeah, I decided to do a test with free plus shipping and handling. The caveat is that I was running to cold traffic, which Jack he's seething on the inside right now.
You can just sense my silence.
Right. The sound of silence. Yeah, exactly.
Let's start unpacking this. What did that funnel look like? What was your offer, and why did you want to start running it to cold traffic?
Okay, so essentially, I've seen the buzz about it, and I've kind of been on the low. Just not really talking a lot on socials lately. I have this greatest hits album rolling out, which, I did press on it for a few months, which, didn't amount to much. And I realized that I'm in a position where I have a lot of fans that have been with me for 10 years, but I don't have a lot of recently generated fans. And it's just because I haven't been running a ton, because I felt like the product I'm issuing right now is kind of in conflict with my overall brand. And so I didn't want these people to be first experiencing me through an orchestral track or remix track,
Right.
And so I felt kind of frozen. I felt like, how am I going to, bring the right people? I mean, everybody who's heard my music all this time, it loves the greatest hits because it's a completely new rendition. It's 20 new versions, right? There's no, it's not a greatest hits where I just chunked all of my pre-existing songs and then put them on an album with like one new song, right? So they really love, I've gotten a lot of great feedback from my fans that they're like, I really love, the remix version of this song or whatever. But for new people, I realize it's a little confusing. Like, who is this person? And if they come in because they love remixes, they're probably not going to like the rest of my stuff. Right.
Right. Yep.
So, but I can't, getting out of the Army 3 years ago and kind of rebooting the rest of my music career, I was like, well, I can't just stop fan acquisition until this album ends or generate a bunch of new fans that aren't going to like anything after this, after this dual disc. So I decided to start experimenting, running to cold traffic. And there have been some wins and some mega losses. I've spent about $24,000 on this funnel in the past 78 days. So
when you're talking about testing, you're really talking about testing. We're not looking at a couple $100 here.
Right. Yes. This is thousands and thousands of dollars, questionable countries, as well as our steady green light countries. I've been doing a lot of stuff in this, and, all that money that I'd saved for PR, I was like, well, maybe I'll chuck some of that into this test. And what's been really interesting is that on the pieces of it that have broken profit, right, that have come above a return of 1x, then I just started putting more money into the experiments, right? Keeping the same budget on the things that are more than breaking even and using whatever was above breaking even to try out new things. And so I've learned a lot of great stuff, just digging into, because I think that cold traffic outside of the fan finder or the video view campaign isn't something that we spend a lot of time in, right? That's our main source of acquisition. So, playing around with conversion campaigns and reach campaigns and all of these other things has been, kind of refreshing so far. So I've been having a fun time, but it hasn't been a 100% success in all departments.
Totally. So let's talk a little bit about it's a free plus shipping and handling funnel that you've been testing to cold traffic.
Right.
So what are you running in that free plus shipping and handling funnel? Is it one of your albums? Is it, do you have any order bumps, upsells? What's going on?
Right. So I'm offering Gilded, which is my last full length record, excluding this greatest hits, which, technically that's rolling out in singles, and they won't be a full album until January 2021, which is when everything's been released. So I've been running, which Gilded is an album from 2013. Okay. So this is not a recent release. So I'm running a free plus shipping and handling funnel. Hey, are you looking for some rock music? Here's, just cover the postage and I'll send you this album. So that's the key offer, is that full length disc. Then I have an order bump, right? Which is a product on the same page before they pay for the first purchase, where they can add my most recent EP from 2018, still not incredibly new, right? They can add that EP for $5. So that's the first, offer that's happening, is this conjunction of the two. Then I have an upsell, which is on the next page after they've already paid for, the first offer, that says, do you want my album from 2010 entitled Game Night? Yeah, the throwback package, which I don't say it like that, but I do say that it's my only other full length to date, right? So, and I'll send that to you. I'm actually charging $10, though I've kind of gone all over the place with the pricing, which we'll get into later. But I'm like, no additional shipping, right? Because it doesn't cost me anymore to send it, but it makes it sound pretty. But I'm actually charging retail for what it would be in my store, which is $10. And then I have another upsell for these limited edition dog tags, which, they cost me, and I've talked about these on a previous episode as well. They cost me 71 cents. I'm using my Glowforge to treat it and write their name on it in my handwriting, and then have that basically burnt onto, in a nice way, burnt onto the dog tag, and send it to them customized with their first name. So, and those are selling for 10 in that funnel. They're for sale on my store for 20. And I've moved, quite a few of them even at full price. So that's the funnel. And I'm also running an alternate for international, but we'll get into that later because that's fun too. So yeah, that's essentially the key offer. And really the front ad is just a montage. There's a ton of video from, when I was in the military and when I was on Warped Tour, and, just a lot of throwback kind of videos that have my 3 of my songs for, I think It's 3 songs in like 49 seconds. So it's a clip, right? Like it is not a whole lot. I picked the strongest, what I felt was the strongest representation of my music across those 3. And, they're just getting that little clip. And what's really shocking is that in the comments of the ad, a lot of the people are like, well, I didn't, all I heard was this little clip, but it sounds great. So I ordered, which is insane to me because there's, only 1,000 places they could go and listen to see if they would like the album. But nope, they just ordered it right then based on that preview and, are waiting until the CDs arrive to listen to it. So it's cool. It's been pretty weird, honestly. So yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, for sure. That's super interesting. And it's been fun to be getting the play-by-play as you've been working on this. Cause it's been what, like a couple months now, I guess, of running this, like almost 3 months almost.
Yeah. I think it was, mid to late July. Mid-July. And today is September 22nd as we're recording. So yeah, it was, roughly eight-ish weeks ago. So yeah, it's been crazy.
So tell me a little bit, what have the ups and downs of this campaign been like for you? I know you've been doing like a lot of meticulous tracking of your return on ad spend as you've been doing it. And for a while, this funnel wasn't profitable.
Right.
So
for a long time.
Yeah, I'd love to break that down.
Right. So the first thing, this is kind of the progression of how this has gone. So when I first launched the campaign, I ran it to the United States only, and I was targeting mostly interest-based audiences. So I ran some, obviously, any rock band with a female singer, right? So that was an interest group. And then I ran an interest group of Warped Tour-ish bands. So that was another interest group. And then, those are doing okay, right? But they weren't doing great. And even though my ROAS was return on ad spend, that is, even though it was like close to 1 or approaching 1 or a little bit below 1, I was like, well, that's okay because at this point, I'm getting their attention, which serves the introduction. They're getting a very, very slight education, in that process as well. And then I'm getting their email and a purchase. So at that point, I've bridged the first 4 pieces of the buddy system in one step. So it's like, okay, well, if normally I pay for video views and then I pay for leads and then I try to get them to buy, this is, even if I made no money on this, if I made as much money from it as would save me the cost of all of those pieces of the buddy system, then this is still worth it, right? So then I started to track not just return on ad spend as reported by Facebook, but then I started to track, okay, what is the gross revenue, right? Because largely, if you have your connections correct, Facebook is going to report to you the income that you've made that's net, which means it does not report shipping. So if you have any margin in your shipping, the numbers are off, right?
Yep.
I'm charging $5 for US-based shipping. Now, to put even all 3 CDs in a bubble mailer and send them out, we're looking at a cost of like, $2.78 or maybe just above $3 if they're on, the opposite end of the country. So there's still margin there, right? So I was kind of looking at what my net income was versus my gross income. And then I was subtracting my cost of goods for all these CDs as well as the shipping. And I was really getting into it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm losing a lot of money on this once I got into that. But it still kind of seemed worth it, to get all of these contacts. But it definitely wasn't like, oh, this is mega profitable. And it's funny because I've seen so many discussions lately about musicians who are running these funnels. And I feel like there's so many costs associated that are just not talked about in these things. And, that's one reason why I really wanted to run it to ground, tracking it that closely is like, how much did I spend on shipping on the orders for this day? What did the cost of goods cost me? Like how many people bought just the album, how many added the upsell, how many added the bump, and calculating what my cost per were on those, because those weren't, you can't just be like, oh yeah, that cost me $1 or that cost me $2. When you're talking about this amount of ad spend, you need to get into the pennies, right? Because if you're talking about 100 orders times pennies, you're talking about dollars. So yeah, I was kind of like, gosh, I really, the ads are doing well, right? All of them have an above average engagement rating, which I normally don't even really pay attention to in Ads Manager. I was getting a crap ton of comments, shares, people were all over it. But it wasn't profitable by any stretch in the beginning. So yeah, that's kind of how it started. But the audience that really started to crush it for me is when I did a little revamp, right? It ran for like 2 weeks and I was like, all right, well, this is less than tight, but it's fine. And then I revamped my creative because the audience seemed to be fatiguing. My costs were going up, my purchases were going down. And I launched an ad set for military interest narrowed by alternative rock. And that's when this thing went cray. It was an easy sell. There was some, military type. I mean, it was documenting that I was in the military in the video. You could see that. And so it was really, at that point, it was fish in a barrel. Basically any rock fans who had respect or interest in the military were all over it. And that's kind of, I think, when the tables turned and I started getting enough data to really experiment a little bit further.
That's so cool. So making that pivot, that audience pivot was, for lack of a better word, pivotal in how this campaign was going.
Yeah.
That's really cool to hear. Something you bring up, and I wanted to mention this, and maybe we get into this even deeper as the episode goes on here. But the importance behind your brand and this specific kind of military angle, and with that, a really dialed in customer audience or a customer avatar. When it comes to running this type of offer, especially to cold traffic, sounds like it'll be really important, and why it kind of, could rule out other artists or some artists from running this kind of strategy.
Right. Yeah, there was a catch, and that was something that was actually kind of showing itself in the comments is, someone be like, who's this? Why do I care? And someone else in the comments would come back and be like, maybe you should Google her, asshole.
Some name recognition. Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't believe when I saw that comment, because
that's amazing.
I am, Googleable, I guess would be the word. So there's a lot of stuff on the internet with my name on it. There's a lot of history that people can just look up that isn't, put through this advertising filter. And I think that was very helpful. I think also like having that, very specific interest, like you're saying, Jack, like having this obvious, like I'm a prior service, combat veteran, I've got this angle, right? And obviously there are a lot of rock fans in the military. So I think that really is what edged it out. I don't even necessarily think that it was just because I redid some audiences. I think it's very specifically because of that talking point.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I mean, I've seen your ad creative, and I know that it's, it speaks to that customer avatar.
Yeah, it ain't light on the military.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Well, and it's Fuse TV's fault, right? Because Fuse TV, Fuse did kind of like a mini doc for Warped Tour, I think it was 2015. And they, shot all this video that I'm using in the creative. And, it's got their little brand on it and everything. But,
I went to the Warped Tour in 2015, and I wonder if we passed by and didn't even know it.
You probably didn't care because I was on the Kevin Says stage, not the big stages. But, they were documenting all of this stuff. So that was just really professionally composed video that I had. So I mixed that and spliced it with like selfie type stuff. And that's really what the product ended up being. But yeah, it's Fuse's fault. I wasn't like, I'm not in uniform or like, You know what I mean? I'm not laying it on that thick. It's just, it is the context. Like in the video, it's quite obvious that, I was a sergeant and I was in the Army and whatever,
Yeah.
So yeah, that audience did really well. And then I was like, well, dang, did I just kind of pigeonhole myself? Right? Because at that point it's like, okay, well, I know that there are fans of the US military in the US, but then, like what if I want to advertise outside the US? Like, are people going to hate my face? So
it's an interesting predicament.
Yeah, totally. So, but yeah, I do think it was very important that there was, it's interesting because, obviously that PR campaign that I was running earlier this year, that didn't do anything for me. For whatever reason, the outlets we were pitching to weren't really that interested in that part of my story, and, I think it's a lot less glamorous on paper and in writing than it is visually. So that was kind of, I was like, well, this is great. I'm getting these eyeballs, but have I now limited myself from expanding it? Like, did I populate and season my pixel with people that wouldn't match anywhere else in the world,
Right.
Which was fine because the US was where I was running, but I was still thinking like, okay, well, is this going to impact how I experiment in other countries?
Right. Yeah. So, and maybe this is rewinding a little bit. I want to unpack this a little bit more.
Okay.
I'm hung up on this idea of like your brand and your customer avatar and where this is all kind of working out. Cause
Right.
you and I have rapped about this on the podcast before and why we talk about running certain types of ads for cold traffic, running awareness introduction stage ads like Fan Finder, for cold traffic, specifically for the reason of, running into issues like that comment that you got that's like, why should I give a shit about this? Why should I want this? So it's really interesting to think about, running a straight conversions campaign. And I think it sounds like, and just, being able to look at this campaign from a 30,000 foot view now,
Right.
And what you're running, to be able to zoom out and be like, what are the puzzle pieces that for you as an artist enabled you to be successful with this kind of strategy as opposed to someone who might not be?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, something that, and we can get into this more later, but when it really started to turn was when I had enough data from the pixel on this specific funnel to start building a lookalike, because those other interest audiences were built from the interest that if I go to my page insights, this is what Facebook says are the people who are interested in me. They love Warped Tour. They love Pierce the Veil, Black Veil Brides, all the veils. They love Paramore. They love Evanescence. These are my avatars. And so building a lookalike off of them, or even off my greatest hits customers, did not outperform this cold traffic military angle. So that was a little bit interesting. And I kind of, once I switched to those lookalikes, it was just crazy to know that the people who would respond to this, in the most successful way would be people who didn't look like anyone that had been on my customer list, mailing list in my ecosystem before.
That's so interesting because you've had a long spanning career with fans who have bought a lot of your stuff and a lot of money worth of merch. So it does make a lot of sense that the type of data that you would have on them versus the type of data that you would use to create a lookalike audience on a funnel like this, a free plus shipping and handling funnel, those people look different,
Right. Yeah. Super different. So, but yeah, once I got out of the interest, and it takes a hot minute when you are trying to get 1,000 people to convert, to then be able to make a lookalike from pixel information for conversions, right? I mean,
AKA a lot of budget.
Yeah, there's yeah, exactly. So there were, and there were 1,000 customers, far before Facebook saw 1,000 purchasers, right?
Yeah.
I actually had to hit around 1,250 customers or 1,250 fires on the pixel before Facebook would say, okay, yeah, there were 1,000 people. You can make a lookalike. It was actually a little crazy. To me, it seemed really important because, once I started shifting to these lookalikes and I found this pivot into the military audience, I was like, okay, if I make a lookalike of all purchasers, it's going to run like that interest targeting did for these bands. It's going to run to those people, which was not profitable. But if I can make a lookalike of only this funnel, purchasers that have only been through this funnel, then, I'll probably be doing a lot better, because they're people who buy, obviously people who buy sight unseen, right? So yeah, it took a long time. I would say it took probably, I want to say, 3 or 4 weeks, and I was running up to $300 or $400 a day. It was a lot. And that's when I finally got to the lookalike point. So, you can make lookalikes off your mailing list. But there's just not going to be a better lookalike for a conversion based campaign than conversions. Like that's just how it's going to be. Especially if it's the same offer, right? If it were a different offer, then it, lookalike might not be powerful. So I definitely pivoted around, and my ads manager and Jack I've shared my ads manager access with Jack, and Jack can attest to this. If you go to my ads manager and you look at all the different campaigns that have been running for the past 2 to 3 months, it's a hot mess.
There's a lot going on in there.
Yeah, I revamped so many times. And it's funny because, we tell you guys, like, don't mess with ads. Oh my gosh. I would be like, okay, I see where I broke this. And then I would start a new campaign, right? Because I didn't want the learning of that campaign to impact the learning of this campaign. So yeah, I definitely learned some hard things about that. He can see in there, it's like, okay, conversions, free plus shipping and handling, US, and then US renewed, and then US revamp, and then US, there's just a different, basically a different suffix on each of these campaigns as I shut one off and turned on another. Are you looking at it right now?
No, I'm just laughing because I'm thinking about like our Slack messages over the past couple months where we'd be like talking about this, and you'd be like, I'm tinkering, and I'd be like, stop tinkering, let it be.
I've actually, there's been quite a bit of shifting, but, I know I keep saying this, we'll get into this further down, but, I actually am at the point now where I'm just letting it do its thing. And it took me a while to kind of generate that trust. Right. Even today, I have one campaign. It's running internationally. It's not doing wonderfully. And I actually increased the budget on it because of how it's competing in the auction. Right. So even though Facebook's like, yep, you're not, breaking even on this. I now have learned enough through this process to know, okay, well, that just means I'm not paying enough to get to the right people.
Right.
And there's been a lot of valuable education happening in this whole thing. So, so that's kind of the state of things that, once I, finished the US, or didn't finish the US, but once I felt confident in the US, then I started running in Canada, which, is obviously harder because international shipping is expensive, right? And I also started running some more worldwide. So I was running to Denmark, and I basically made a different campaign for every country. So I made a campaign for the UK, and I made a campaign for Germany, and I made a campaign for Denmark, and I made a campaign for the Netherlands, and I made a campaign, for Norway, and I made another one for Finland and Sweden. And so I was running all these campaigns at anywhere from, $10 a day to $30 a day to kind of see how these countries would perform against each other. And the biggest problem that I was looking at as I was kind of looking at my metrics is that plenty of people clicked through, but the conversion rate sucked because the shipping was $14, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And even unless I lost money, because it cost about $13.78 to send, you know, to Europe from here.
Yeah.
And so unless I wanted to like lose even more money than I was on ad sets that weren't breaking even, it just wasn't possible, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I think something we talk about when it comes to free plus shipping and handling strategies in general, even in the trainings inside Indie Pro, is, you know, when you're running to a warm audience and you've got, you know, back inventory that you're working with and you're just trying to clear stuff, you can afford to dip into the red a little bit.
Right.
But when you're running a campaign to cold traffic and testing that out like this at scale, you know, you don't want to be losing money constantly.
Right.
That's not customer creation at the cold traffic level, you know, overseas at scale.
Right.
Losing money is not really ideal at all.
Yeah, exactly. And so what's funny is that before I pivoted to all these other countries, the reason I pivoted to these other countries is that it was obvious. And I said, you know, I was like, Jack, look at this with me, right? Like, what am I missing? But it was obvious that the campaign was fatiguing, right? Like the frequency wasn't crazy high, but the results just weren't coming in. And I was looking at, you know, if you ever are in your ad sets level in Business Manager and you hover over an ad set, a little magnifying glass with inspect will show up. And, you know, a lot of indies don't use this and we don't have any training on it, but it's a relatively new feature. But you click on it, it'll tell you, you know, what your audience saturation is, what the first impression percentage is. It'll tell you how competitive your bid is in the market. So if you're running something at $1 a day, $5 a day, you're probably not very competitive, which means your costs are going to be higher because there are more people competing at the budget you're willing to spend. Whereas if you up the budget, you're now above the people who are willing to spend that amount of money. So that was a big reason, but I was looking at all of those factors in my US campaign and it was just flat fatiguing. It was not working anymore. And I had already tried to pivot to this other audience and, you know, I was like, well, and I had just ordered 1,000 copies of all 3 of the albums in this funnel and just after that, it started to peter out. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me right now. So, because I was trying to get my costs down and I just like had this confidence that it was just going to keep rolling. Not so much.
Yeah.
So then I was like, all right, now I need to pivot to these international audiences. And that part was, you know, challenging.
Yeah. So what kind of challenges did you come up with in that apart from figuring out the shipping logistics and being able to pivot around there to make it affordable for them? Yeah.
Well, so what I realized, like I said, on these international audiences where I had built all of these, not different ad sets, but different campaigns, because I wanted to see how the countries competed independently without having to compete against each other. I wanted the data to be objective and not have Facebook feeding it to particular countries. I wanted to see that itemized. And so, you know, I saw like in the UK, it was crushing and the UK is still doing well for me now. Although it's because of some changes and I'll get into that later, but you know, some of these countries I would get like bam, 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 like 3 purchases in a day and then nothing for like 3 to 4 days. And it would still end up like 0.3 ROAS, right? And at this point I was testing interest-based audiences. I was testing lookalikes. I basically made a lookalike individually, 2% for each of these countries off that pixel data. And I also made a lookalike of my customer list that I exported from Shopify into there exclusively for this offer. And I did that because when I, wanted to experiment and just see, they actually only overlapped by about 38%. Now, if you're familiar with our training, you know that we're like, okay, if you have a bunch of artists for your fan finder and then you have a bunch of other artists for your fan finder and they overlap by more than 10%, you want to just put them all in the same ad set or else you're going to be bidding against yourself in the auction, right? You're basically bidding on people twice. So I was like, well, they overlap, but only by 38%, which I thought they'd overlap almost 100% because it's the same people, you know, but it didn't for whatever reason. So I made a lookalike.
Head scratcher.
Yeah, I know. So I made a lookalike from the pixel data. I also made a lookalike off the manually uploaded customer list. And I made a lookalike of people who had viewed the checkout. Yeah, let me go back a second. So when people click on the ad, they don't go directly to the sales page or to a page where they can check out. They go to a page, basically it's an education page where I'm like, I literally say, hey, I'm Corrin. I love cats. I make rock music. If you're interested, you know, in a conversation like that, scroll on down to get my album. You know, that's literally, it's almost literally what it says. But it's still a place for me to separate people who will click on an ad and the people who are a little bit more interested, even if they don't buy.
Yeah.
So I made a lookalike of that, people who clicked through from that first page and got to the checkout. So I ran those 3 lookalikes against each other and, figured out, I basically had the 2 lookalikes that had 38% overlap together, and the checkout view lookalike was only an overlap of like 8%. So I ran that separately.
Nice.
Yeah, which is weird, right? It's so weird.
Very.
So I ran those against each other and I pivoted there. And then I realized that the frequency was getting really high as the ad fatigued. So then I basically duplicated that lookalike audience, made another lookalike audience, but then excluded people who had engaged with my ad in the last 60 days so that I could kind of guarantee that new people would see it versus the ones in the lookalike that Facebook was like, nope, if I keep showing it to George, he's going to buy it. You know what I mean? I'm going to show it to him 5 times, 7 times, you know, which is true. You know, it's a common marketing knowledge that people usually see something 5 to 7 times before they buy, you know, but I just wanted to make sure that there were new people getting into it. Again, micromanaging the machine, which I learned later is not always the best. So yeah, there was a lot of audience pivoting going on as I was trying to like really, really figure out like if this could be done, how it could be done, you know, what should be mitigated, what data you need. Like, you know, we are looking at revamping free plus shipping and handling because it is, you know, we've posted updates in that training, but it has some of the most origin content in it from when it was first created. So, you know, I was basically trying to figure out use cases for this because if it could work for indies, it's something that we want to test and that we want to let indies know that this is working. And so all I was doing was trying to get it to work. I wanted to see, even with the smartest possible pivots I could do with the knowledge I have, you know, let alone trying to put it in a step-by-step training. Like if I did the most ninja things I know how to do, which, you know, I don't know if I'm a self-proclaimed ninja, but I'm just saying if I made it as advanced as I possibly could myself, could I prove that this could be done, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, what are the pros and cons that you feel about this now, having been, you know, 78 days into this experiment and into this test? If someone was wondering, is this something that I should undertake for myself or consider trying?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of factors.
I think so too.
Right. So just for some context, before I dig into that, I am currently running now 6 campaigns. And I tweaked them. Like I tweaked new campaigns 3 days ago. Like I created brand new campaigns. But everything that I've learned so far is that, first off, it's very difficult to, and you know, there's a couple other people within the agency, within the staff that are also experimenting with this. I'm definitely not the only one. I'm probably the only one running it at this budget level, this volume. What I learned is that, first off, you need some kind of pitch, right? You need it, and it's not just like you're special, your music is special. That's not going to be enough. There has to be a conversation point, right?
It certainly can't just be a free CD trinket, you know?
Yeah, absolutely not. And there's, even if your interest targeting is on point, it still isn't, it has to be something that they would talk to about their friends. Like I found this person who also wears, bedazzled skinny jeans or whatever, right? Like, and I was actually picturing a man when I said that, funny enough. So don't think I'm talking about women. Yeah. No, but I mean, it's definitely, there has to be something about you. Also, this level of street cred, internet cred, right? I saw a lot of traffic on my site that did not come from that landing page. People were finding their way around, going to Google. Maybe they didn't trust that ad and they wanted to go see what I was actually about. So having all of that stuff out there, that media out there, having name association, brand affiliation, all of that stuff was, I think, pivotal in actually getting this to work. I would be interested to try to replicate it with someone who doesn't have that kind of substantial online presence, right? Because, people are smart enough. They're going to go look you up. They're going to want to know, okay, how legit is this? If I give this person $10, am I ever going to see what I'm supposed to get from it?
For sure.
So yeah, I think that has become quite evident. Based on the comments on this post, it's evident that these people know that I was in the military. A lot of them were in the military themselves. Like, this is very context driven. So if you just think, well, my music is special and that'll make it happen, like that, I haven't seen that that's going to happen because I've run it both ways, And I just don't see it, it doing that at a purely music level.
That's super interesting. It's really interesting the point you make about like people just being smart. I think we're in a world right now, especially like post March entrance of COVID into this world.
Yeah.
We're in a time right now where like people are immersed in e-commerce advertising, and they're probably immersed in like,
fact
look at this
checking.
Fidget spinner. I wasn't even going to go down that road. I wasn't even going there, but totally.
Yeah. That's a complete thing. I mean, people are so used to getting so much of their information online. We're in a very politically charged environment, especially in the States right now. So there's a lot of talk about fact checking on both sides of the fence, or those of us who stand in the middle. Going to Snopes.com, figuring, people are taking more responsibility for determining the legitimacy of an offer or a talking point. I think that that's something that culturally is changing, and people are getting smart about that. People are getting smarter about how to hide their ads. Obviously there's still people who don't. Every time someone comments on one of my ads, it's like, why do I keep seeing this? I post a screenshot of me hovering over the hide ad graphic, but people are getting a lot smarter, and they're taking more personal responsibility for what's on their feed and what they purchase, where they're getting information. So yeah, I think that's why it makes your website more important than ever. That's why, I wouldn't go so far as to say that SEO is really important for a musician generally, but having some stuff exist online is really important.
Yeah, for sure. I think that it's just interesting, like with audiences being so tuned into, buying things online right now.
Yeah.
One of the conversations that you and I had early on when you were starting the test is like, the hypothesis of like, how do we ensure that the type of customer that's being created at this very, with this very front end first touch offer isn't just someone buying something that's going to end up being a coaster on their desk and never engaging with you again.
Yeah.
Are we skipping steps in the buddy system? And that was something that was really interesting to me as you were testing this. And also, just to speak to like in addition to your name recognition, your brand presence, everything that you have going on up until this point, in your career, you have a really great back-end e-commerce infrastructure.
Sure.
And I think that that's I would say that that's critically important to make sure that these customers aren't just, a one-off buy a CD and aren't actually a fan.
Right.
How has that played into the long tail of this for you and kind of where you see it going?
Well, that's an interesting kind of perspective that I've gained in this, is that at this point, when you've skipped someone in the buddy system, right? Because usually we're like, okay, let them see who I am, and then let me tell them about me, and then let me get permission, and then let me get them to make a purchase, right? By skipping those steps, you're now in a position to basically you've got their attention right now, and you might never get it again. Because at this point, they have not developed a loyalty to you, which is kind of why the buddy system way, in my mind, still works better for most musicians. And to be honest, I'm still running these ads, right? I've completely restructured them, and I'm actually really happy with the way they've been restructured, which I can kind of give some light on at the end of this. But the thing that kept that ROAS above 1 when the ads weren't above 1 was all of the things that I had going for free and all of the things that I had to follow up with, after their purchase. So, even when I was sending out, because there were months, or there were days, I should say, and then an entire month where I was literally, I
heard the drop in your voice as you said that.
Well, no, it's actually, it's literally, I'd be moving 100 CDs a day, up to sometimes 75 orders. So even more. The take rate on the bump, for example, was, it has averaged 65% in my funnel. Hardly anyone just bought the first album. They also added the second album. I think when you have someone's attention who's a CD buyer, right? Being able to offer them upsells of CDs is like, okay, if you're even interested in a CD, first off, you're a minority, right? So let me give you CDs, because obviously you find value in that product. So now I'm going to offer you a product that has nothing to do with your preference. You're already here buying an album. Because I tried apparel. I tried a lot of other upsells and pivoted to a lot of other bumps and, tested all kinds of things. And really what ended up working the best was CD, CD, CD. And then I added a little dog tag necklace, like, hey, you made it this far. It even says on the sales page, like, I know I'm being a bit cheeky here, but if you want this last thing, and that's obviously heavy leaning towards the people who are, military affiliated. They can put my dog tag on the rest of their dog tag chains, So, but that, I think it was really, CD, 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 it's a highest margin, right? They're easy to, get back in stock, right? It doesn't take me a ton of time to I don't have to design a shirt. I don't have to worry about if they like wearing shirts or if they like wearing beanies or any of that. There's no real judgment call to make. If you're willing to buy this piece of plastic with my music on it, you'll probably buy these other pieces of plastic with my music on it. Especially considering that these people have had no exposure to my music. They're just kind of trusting in it. So, but none of that alone ran profitable in any kind of significant way. What really made things profitable was the fact that I have an automation set up, right? Obviously, they get an email when they order. They get an email from me 4 minutes later, basically that says, hey, yeah, okay, you got your shipping confirmation, but hi, this is who I am. I'd love to hear from you. I package I package everything myself. I write personal notes on every single packing slip. I check all my own messages. I respond to every single comment that's on any of those posts. And I haven't checked lately, but I want to say there's 600 plus comments on the ad that's been running primarily. I answer every single one, and I really stress to them, I'm an independent artist. consider yourself my record label. You have just made what I do possible, right? So there's this huge plea for loyalty, essentially, at that point. I'm not asking them for anything. I'm just being like, look, you are super important to me, right?
Yeah.
So having that set up. And then also I have, and you guys, I've touched on this a lot of times, but I have CC Points, which is my Facebook Messenger game. I have the Gilded experience, which is actually a perfect match for the people who are buying Gilded. I have the TuneSpeak campaign that's going on. I have a closed Facebook group for mailing list subscribers, and I'm constantly feeding these into the emails. I also have automation set up. So basically, if they order Gilded, Drip is beautiful this way because I can basically tell Drip like, hey, okay, when someone makes one purchase, it's their first purchase, keep them right here. And then when Shopify sends a fulfillment notification, right? So essentially, once I've shipped it, wait 7 days and then send them an email that says, hey, like it has a selfie in it. It's very casual. It was like, did you get your albums yet? I want to make sure they got to you okay. Are you liking them? And says, if you want, e-com is crazy. Even for music, people want to see reviews. And I ask them to go leave a review. That's splintered out by the highest level product that they bought. So if they bought all 3, it asks for the third one. If they bought only 2, it asks for a review on the second one. If they buy just the one album, it sends them there. And the number of follow-up purchases I got by sending them to my store to leave a review, and the reviews are freaking awesome, by the way. So I ain't mad about that either. But the number of follow-up purchases that I've gotten from it are really what has made this something tangible. I ran an auction about a month into these ads, and I sold off a piece of, Army produced music, right? It's my music, but it's on an Army printed CD. It's got Army branded art, right? It's just something that I had left over. And I auctioned it. And I think I mentioned this on a previous episode, but I auctioned it and it sold for $116, that person was one of these people who came in through this funnel. So all of these things set up is really the only reason why I'm starting to see profit. I am emailing these people constantly. I am constantly pushing in the footer of every single email. I have a super signature that shows them all of these free things that I have set up. I also have an opt-in for the membership site. All of that is in every single email that I send them dynamically based on the actions that they have already taken, and filtering out the things that they have not yet done. But, it's interesting because, they say this in regular commerce, e-commerce marketing, right? First purchase is easy, relatively. It's the second purchase that's hard. And when you shift to this free plus shipping and handling funnel, you have to start thinking like an e-com marketer, which is very different from the way that we typically are marketing music over here, because we're talking more about relationship building. And, once, in the buddy system, once someone makes a purchase, like it's fine, right? Like you're going to get them, because they already care enough about you to have made that purchase. But in this case, you had someone who was on the tube going home from work and was bored and bought something quick for $5, and they have no ownership in that unless you help them do that. And I've generated roughly, I want to say 2,700 customers in the last 8 weeks or whatever it's been. And, I would say, let me look at my little chart because I'm tracking.
Got that meticulous ROAS tracking. That's what I'm talking about.
The amount of manual time I spend tracking every little variable and facet of this is ridiculous.
In case we haven't made it clear, this is not for the faint of heart.
Right, exactly.
None of it.
This is not going to be a simple step-by-step, and for a lot of people, it will not work. And to be honest, there are still some days where mine do not work, And I'm like, you know, without sounding big on myself, like I'm good at this. You know, I know how to market on Facebook. I know how to pivot. I know how to market non-music things, you know. I would consider myself, you know, an expert, not necessarily a total master, but an expert in Facebook ads and general customer nurturing. And it's not easy, you know, when it really boils down to brass tacks, when you really look at the ad spend, when you really look at cost of goods, right? About 12% of the customers that I've gained in the last 8 weeks has converted to a second purchase. The rest of them, some of them I hear from them in my free things, and a good 40% of them I've never heard from again. You know, they haven't opened any emails since then. They haven't interacted with me at all. You know, and it's just like if a friend, you know, stops calling you, maybe they just got busy, right? I don't go home and cry over these 40%, but you know, it goes to show that when I'm talking about my non-cold free plus shipping and handling customers, when I'm talking about the customers that I've had for several years or fans that have been around for several years, the conversion rate to another purchase is much higher and the drop-off rate is much lower. I'm looking at more like about 18%. 18% of people who have been with me for any period of time have quit opening my emails, right? And then I clean them out. So it's harder to, you know, so if you think that you want to launch this free plus shipping and handling funnel and that it's going to make you a crap ton of fans and make you a crap ton of money, like you have to question yourself, do you want to commit this many hours a day? Do you want to have to think about like, is it worth, you know, getting $2 of profit from someone who may not ever care about you ever again? I think if anything, it really illustrates how important having that whole buddy system structure, that auto nurturing for the people who are willing to just keep, you know, listening and coming back and going through more of your things. Like if you don't have that kind of follow-up set up, if you don't have those options for them to continue, you know, basically being engulfed in your world of their own volition, if you don't have that stuff present, this is going to run and then stop. And then you might not be any further than when you first started. That's a lot of effort for a couple of bucks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of effort, a lot of budget, a lot of,
Yeah.
a lot of stuff. It sounds like there's, you know, there's a number of qualifiers as to what has made this work for you that could be disqualifiers for others, you know?
Right. Right.
It's not a magic strategy or a bulletproof funnel or anything like that.
Yeah, definitely not. I think too,
it's super interesting.
Yeah. I mean, something that has been interesting too is, you know, all the time I have, you know, I'm just kind of self-evaluating in this moment, but I talk about how, you know, sometimes the Facebook machine doesn't really understand like what we musicians are trying to do, right? Because we're not trying to go for straight conversions. We're not selling a solution to a problem. We're not optimizing for through plays. We're optimizing for 75% video views. And for a while I was like, yeah, we're different, you know, but one thing that is not different from my experience in this is that I was trying to micromanage the algorithm, you know, the machine far too much. And when I had all those different countries in different campaigns, it couldn't turn it couldn't even be, unless I wanted to run $1,000 a day, I couldn't put enough budget on those countries to actually compete in the countries for the right people's attention.
Yeah.
And so then I combined them and I would see these different ad sets and, you know, it'd be putting more money in this country and I'd be like, oh, I don't like that. And so what I ended up doing is like, okay, if I'm going to go in on this, I'm just going to trust the machine, you know, especially because right now.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right now, especially I'm going for conversions. This is the typical way that the machine works, you know? And so and I'll be sure to report back because chances are this could crash and burn as well. But as of 3 days ago, I basically launched 6 campaigns that are running to different countries. I now have UK-based fulfillment, which is allowing me to offer international shipping at a much lower rate, almost 50% of what it costs here, which has been a total game changer. That's really the only thing that has brought those international countries into viability at all. Because there were very passionate people coming from a lot of countries, but there were definitely not enough of them to pay for the advertising. So I even tried discounting international shipping to $12.50, which would be a loss of about $1.25 per, because I didn't get a lot of $0 purchases. I have a pay what you want funnel. So, there would be a lot of generous people. And I was like, well, that'll make up the margin there. And I was like, I can't, it wasn't at the end of cost of goods and shipping and all that. It wasn't netting profit, and it didn't end up making any sense. So now I have UK fulfillment, which has helped me with that. And that, now I basically have these 6 different ads or these different campaigns, 6 campaigns running. Each of them has 3 ad sets. One is my lookalikes, all wrapped into one, even though I was running them separately before. I just put them all into one. All my lookalikes in one. I've got a second ad set that is that lookalike minus 60-day ad engaged. And then I have a third one that is interests. And it's all the interests that I used before wrapped into one. I have a minimum daily ad spend on that ad set of 10% of whatever the campaign daily budget is. So if I'm running $100 a day on a campaign, I've got 10% minimum to spend on those interests just because I'm still micromanaging a little.
Sure. Yeah.
But the other thing is that with these lookalikes, I didn't build them 2% per country and then put them in there. I trusted the machine enough to make a lookalike of 9 European countries and put them all into one 2% lookalike. 1, 2. A single 2% lookalike. And that's how it's currently running. And, I'm really trying to trust the machine, and I'll report back on how it goes. But largely when I've gotten out of the way of the machine and given it like a fair amount of budget, and I'm talking about like these, there's 3 of them that are running at like $50 a day, and most of them are running above $100 a day. I think there's 2 that are at 50, one at 75, and then the 3 others are above $100 a day, anywhere from 100 to 130. And without that budget, it can't roll, So if you're like, oh, maybe I'll try a free push shipping and handling funnel at $10 a day, that's not going to cut it. You won't be able to do it. So it's a very high risk game. And that's, outlined in the auction, which, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, go listen to it. Cirque talks a lot about the auction and how that's actually his favorite part of the ad guide that's going to be coming out and, or maybe out depending on what time you're listening to this, since I don't know anything. But the auction is a very interesting concept to understand, because if you don't have a huge amount of money to throw around, you may not hit your people. Now, if your people aren't expensive, you could still hit your people. But if your people are expensive, and mine are, with CPMs around, $13 to $15, right? If they're more expensive, it's going to be very competitive to get those eyeballs. And so if you're running a conversion campaign at $5, $10 a day, you will see less of a return than if you ran 20. That said, I'm not telling you to go out and spend $20 a day on a conversion ad. But you can see where there's a lot of risk involved here and a lot of pivots. And, so really the whole point of this, more than anything, because I even have these people on a separate mailing list. I have them in separate audiences from the rest of my, warmth. I'm keeping them separate. I'm siphoning them because I really wanted to try to have the most objective feedback from this test as I could, right? If I were a brand new artist, what would this look like? If I didn't have the lookalikes of the, 5,000 people that purchased my greatest hits album, like if I don't have any of that information, what happens here? you know? And it's very, very difficult. It's really difficult. And so to me, it was kind of a cautionary tale as well as just a general share. Gosh, guys, be careful with this. If you're hearing about free plus shipping and handling funnels, I do think it's something that can be hacked over time, right? And it's not hacked, it's engineered. And if you have enough knowledge to engineer it,
that's a good way to word it.
You know what I mean? It is something that can be, brought to a system kind of over weeks and months, but it's definitely not something to play around with if you're kind of new to it. So what I'm hoping is that, we can do some cool things with this type of funnel and put it into Indie Pro in a way that can work for lots of different indies and hopefully have some recommendations on finding those interest points, right? You playing your music isn't going to be enough, which in a fan finder can be, right? Just you playing your instrument in an ad, that can work. But when it comes to trying to go straight for cold conversions, right? It's going to be different, And hopefully in that training, we'll also be able to cover some stuff about reach campaigns, which can be very successful as well with following up with these folks. But yeah, so it's exciting, in a way to be like, okay, this funnel grossed, $27K last month. That's crazy, right? But it cost me, first off, $15K to run it, plus all the cost of goods, plus the shipping. It's really hardly more than break even if you don't count their follow-up purchases. So quite the complex formula.
Thanks for bearing your soul on this one. This is so good.
Yeah. Well, it's hard, when you have a 10-year career, it's hard to imagine. And, I'm a woman in the rock scene. So, maybe in the rock scene less than the pop scene. But, women are often aged out, which I think is stupid. But
it's BS.
a lot, and musicians generally, honestly, a lot feel like they're getting aged out. And so, this was an opportunity for me to be like, all right, like, how viable is my brand still? Like, would the people who haven't loved me for 10 years come in and hopefully eventually love me, right? And so this was a really kind of vulnerable experience in that way. The same thing as you do with a fan finder. It's tough to like filter out all the haters, right? And if you think that, a regular fan finder gets hate, just go ahead and slap army branding on it. And you'll definitely see them just come out of the woodwork, man. The trolls are like, instantly attracted. But yeah, I mean, and, if you're looking for some kind of like mission statement or position statement coming out of this, I don't have one for you, it's still something in motion. It's just something that I know was out there. I wanted to touch on it. I wanted to experiment myself with, and not just like form an opinion on all the things out there being said, without putting my money where my mouth is. You guys know that I'm all about that. And so I'm just reporting facts, I'll continue to trial things. If you're an Indie Pro member, there's actually a ground report on free plus shipping and handling, where I'm going to be diving into like money, right? And really bearing even more of the details. It's a little hard to summate on a podcast, like all the things, but there is a ground report on this as well. And I'll continue testing, and maybe I'll have something really cool to report back in Q1 of next year. But for now, that's what I got from the field. That's all I have to report for now.
What an awesome overview. Like, thank you so much for just unpacking it. I think that that's great. And it hopefully gives everyone, like you said, a cautionary tale of what can be done, where you should tread lightly, when you should tread lightly, how this could be viewed as a gimmick.
Right.
And where to look for getting it right.
Yeah. I think if I were to have any kind of position statement, I would say that whether you're talking about the fans that have been around or whether you're talking about running free plus shipping and handling to cold people, have all the things, have the steps that support the buddy system, have a crap ton of free nurturing tools that people can automatic buddy themselves into, whether that's an email experience, whether that's, having some kind of points or reward system, whether that's having a game in your ManyChat bot, whether that's, having some kind of contest. Constantly have these things there, because if someone has purchased something from you, you owe them a bunch of free cool shit, have that available, or
work that nurturing.
Yeah. Or that customer could be as good as gone, So definitely, no matter what kind of conversion campaign or what kind of sales you're trying to make, to whom or where, have that stuff in place. Because I think without that, this wouldn't have even continued. I would have quit it after 3 weeks. I would have been like, that there's no long tail to this thing, so I'm done.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my 2 cents on it.
This was such a fun episode. Like, so cool to just get a 30,000 foot overview, and then, microscopic looking at it with a magnifying glass, getting every nitty gritty detail that you had to share.
Yeah. Trust me, guys,
Super cool.
I'm trying to limit myself. We're already over an hour, and I'm trying to limit myself because I want to tell you guys every little piece of it, but I'm going to save that for the ground report, right? Or it's, I'm going to save that for that and our upcoming training. So I guess if you want in, you're going to have to go Indie Pro. So if you aren't already, obviously, you can do that at indiepreneur.io. Otherwise, we'll see you here next week for free things on Creative Juice.
We'll catch you guys next time.
East Coast, West Coast.